This week, Joel Burleson-Davis from Imprivata is with us to discuss transforming frontline workflows with Passwordless. Then, for this week's topic segment, we discuss the economics of AI agents. And then finally, in the enterprise security news, we've got funding and acquisitions, 7 red flags you're doing cloud wrong, or signs that you're doing cloud wrong, security standards for open source projects, postmortems of attacks on open source supply chain, some analysis on current and historic AWS outages, a deep dive, some dumpster fires. We're not deep diving into the dumpster fires, though. Those are separate things. And how much would you pay for a robot that puts away the dishes? All that and more on this episode of Enterprise Security Weekly.
This is a Security Weekly production for security professionals by security professionals. Please visit securityweekly.com/subscribe to subscribe to all the shows on our network.
It's the show where we talk security vendors and aren't afraid to name names. It's Enterprise Security Weekly. Imprivata delivers simple and secure access management solutions for healthcare and other mission-critical industries to ensure every second of crucial work is both frictionless and secure. Imprivata Enterprise Access Management delivers simple and secure access to any app from any device with single sign-on, multi-factor, and passwordless authentication. The solution streamlines workflows, reduces password fatigue, and ensures seamless access for every identity. Learn more about how Imprivata is redefining secure access at securityweekly.com/Imprivata. Welcome to Enterprise Security Weekly and happy National Candy Corn Day, I guess, if you like eating trash. This is episode 431, recorded on Thursday, October 30th, 2025. It's the day before Halloween. I have opinions, and I'm your host, Adrian Sanabria. Joining us is the Dean of Data Science, the Apostle of AI, the Watcher of Data Center Waste, Jackie McGuire. How you doing, Jackie?
Howdy. I am great. I feel good. I just started a Trenta cold brew, so I'm going to be levitating by the end of this episode.
News is going to be fun. Also joining us is the King of Kerberos, the Pirate King of PowerShell, Sean Metcalf. How are you doing, Sean?
Doing well, thank you, Adrian. I am here with you on this National Candy Corn Day. There could have been something better for today, I'm sure, but candy corn is what it is.
Yeah, it really should be National Buy Your Costume at the Last Minute Day, because I feel like that's what a lot of people, a lot of parents are doing right now. I'm sure this is the height of the year for costume sales.
Yeah, absolutely. The Spirit Halloween store is going to be crowded today.
Yeah, it's going to be packed. This interview is sponsored by Imprivata, and today's topic is improving frontline workflows with Passwordless. We're excited to have Joel Burleson-Davis with us today. Joel is the Chief Technology Officer for Imprivata. Welcome to the show, Joel.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, wonderful to have you. And this is a really interesting topic. I'm really excited about this one because, well, first of all, we're not talking about the thing that we talk about way too much, which I'm not going to mention. And second of all, so part of what I do, I'm in front of I'm talking about the latest and greatest, like innovation, early adoption type stuff. We're talking about a robot that puts away dishes later. But the other half of what I do is I talk to enterprises about their problems. And there are I feel like, I don't know what percentage it is, but most businesses are way back 20 years ago.
Yeah, it's almost like they're disconnected, right? And they're in different worlds. It's like different realities.
Right. It's a reality check. And I love that I have that reality check, but I love it when the two things come together. And on this show, we get to talk about some of the more, maybe less exciting, not bleeding edge technology, but still real problems that a lot of organizations have, right?
Yeah, and it's always interesting because you have to also take them that mind shift for some of those enterprises, because they're like using technology for very different purposes, right? Like, we'll probably get into it, but talking about manufacturing or healthcare, it's like they don't really care that the computer is there; it's just there to do a function for them. So
right,
then when you talk about
they don't care what brand
it
is. They don't care what software is on it, just as long as it's not too much of a pain. It's not wasting too much of their time, right?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
And doesn't go down ever. So for that mind shift, Joel, maybe help us, like when you think frontline workers and frontline worker workflows, what are some good examples for us to be imagining as we kind of talk through this?
Yeah, there's usually three populations that I sort of point at to really think about frontline workers, at least the ones that we interact with often. Like one is healthcare and clinical workers, nurses, doctors, physicians, assistants. So people that are in hospitals, in clinics, sort of using that technology to give sort of patient care. Another really useful sort of thought about sort of frontline worker is someone on the manufacturing line, especially modern manufacturing line. They are, doing work, and sometimes their computer systems are really close to them, sometimes they're far away, and they're often very centralized around operational technology. And then the third population that we think about often are folks in the justice system, particular officers and police officers, picking up a set of gear to put in a squad car to sort of move around and use that, or getting back to the headquarters and going through criminal justice record system, things like that. And so there's this, we really try to think about it as like folks whose primary job actually isn't like technology or technology related, like have some other function to do, like their primary work isn't actually being done on that a piece of technology.
Right. Yeah, it makes sense. And those are great examples. I think, I did PCI for a while. So when I think about it, the first thing that comes to mind is retail, right? Point of sale, because that was something you had to worry about from a payment data standpoint. And yeah, in a lot of these cases, speed is important. I think particularly for retail, maybe if you're at Spirit Halloween today and people are trying to buy costumes and the lines are long,
can't go
right?
fast enough, right?
Yeah, you don't want to be having people type in complex 26 character passwords or anything like that.
Yeah,
and then their password expires.
That's why you still see some retailers on mainframe. Like every time I go into a Guitar Center and I see the black and green, I'm like, hell yeah! Like,
I was gonna say there are some funny powers. Like retail is an interesting one, right? Because the power dynamics there. Right? Often retail workers are like, this kind of sucks and that's slow. They doesn't carry the same weight. So if you're in a hospital surgeon or a hospital system and a brain surgeon says this is slow and not okay, like often, or a police officer, things like that. It's like there's like different, what would you call it? Sort of just like power dynamics or power distance between the decision makers and those frontline. So you often find that, the more power they have in those systems, the louder they get about how being slow or being down is not okay.
Yeah, Joel, I love that you mentioned frontline workers seeing it as a tool, because in my mind, frontline workers are very different than office workers that are using, say, Microsoft Office or some sort of office platform and dealing with email and having that sort of workflow. Frontline worker to me is someone who uses the computer as a tool and often has an application that is what they live in pretty much all the time, like hospital workers. They're in a certain application that has healthcare data. They're updating it. And then you have manufacturing, where most of the people on the line don't need an account. They don't need Office. They don't need any of those things, except maybe they need to log into their HR system or something like that. And that's where something like a badge across the board makes a lot of sense. Now, what are some of the most common passwordless methods that you've seen that are successful?
So sort of in taking into account those dynamics, one I'll point out that's also, it's implicit in what you were saying, is there's a dynamic around mobility. Folks in those lines of business are moving around. They're not necessarily often have an assigned desk they're really at. So they have to be able to do that job with that sort of tool, that technology tool, in lots of different places and sort of along different ways. So there's a few sort of modalities of passwordless that we're really focusing on that makes sense in those scenarios. One is facial biometric, right? Like we all love iPhone Face Unlock and Android Face Unlock and Windows Hello and things like that. In these, frontline worker scenarios, it's a lot harder, but there's a lot of that same sort of benefit. You can imagine if you've got your hands full or, because you're like in the middle of surgery, or like you're helping someone with surgery or something like that. You're in the OR. Like, I don't want to type a password into something, I don't want to do, I can't maybe grab my badge, or I don't have my cell phone because I'm not allowed to bring my, cell phone for an MFA push into this area. And so, that's one very flexible way. But we also think of it that there's sort of levels of sort of passwordless, modalities. And it, like, depending on the workflow, depending on the location, the type of work, some will work better than others. In some scenarios, you can't use your hands. Some scenarios, there's not a camera, so you can't do facial. And so often you find,
let me log in and then go scrub up again and come
yes,
back.
Exactly. Yeah. And like sterilize my phone, like all sorts of things there. It's like, okay, like you really got to think, like, inside the same institution, accessing the same maybe medical record system, you'll find that there needs to be, 5, 10, 15 different sort of authentication flows to get into the same system, because sometimes there's no camera. Sometimes you're not allowed to have phones. Sometimes you can't use your hands. And so, a lot of this sort of passwordless dynamic, the primary benefit is really making it easier and finding new sort of modalities that can make it simpler, because passwords kind of suck always, right? Like they're like never simple, or memorized secrets are never super simple. So, being able to do that and not mess with their work, because they will get angry at you.
That's really interesting that you mentioned different types of passwordless in the same organization. So using facial recognition in maybe an operating room versus a badge for nurses going around and dealing with patients. That's fascinating. I wouldn't have thought of that.
I've heard, are you also hearing more about hard tokens again? Because I used to love my little keychain fob that had the 6-digit code on it. I did. It was
okay,
easy
weirdo.
To use. What? No.
Yeah.
I
mean, there is some.
I'm the only one.
Yeah.
The moment I could move
authenticated
it to my BlackBerry and use my BlackBerry and not have to carry that extra, I was mad about YubiKeys. Like, everybody was so happy about YubiKeys. I was like, I just got rid of my RSA token. Like, I already have a phone with me. Do something with
and sometimes they're hard,
Yeah,
right? Like, I had
just-
10 different versions, and I was like, I don't really understand. Like, I'm not going to use these. They're always going to stay in. And they're like, sort
I
of
get that
worthless.
part, but when it was on your BlackBerry, it was on your BlackBerry. Your BlackBerry had like 8 apps to do things, right? Like, I don't know. I just always am. That's why everybody knows, like, I carry 2 phones because
mine had like 8,000 apps, but I'm special. I'm that guy. I am that employee.
Well,
the risk.
I bow down to, I just want my clicky keyboard back. But no, I mean, I'm always sketched out about what I do on my personal device, and where, like, having the same MFA provider on a device that I'm doing personal things on. So I don't know.
Well, I think, Jackie, we're demonstrating exactly what Joel is saying, that you need a ton of options.
Yeah.
Like the same option, like when you were saying sometimes you can't use your hands. Like, I've had some conversations with you get to a large enough organization, they're going to have employees who don't have hands, right?
Especially if it's a
you're like,
meatpacking
oh,
organization.
right. Like, some people have disabilities and cannot,
like
or maybe
Tyson
they don't
Foods. Like,
Wow. But in the same, in that same frame, you're like, okay, so you have to make it really easy for all these people, but as everybody on this call knows, that like the threat environment out there is getting worse and worse. So it's like security is not an option. So you have to keep adding security, which is a great question from you, Jackie. It's like, all right, what about like these hard physical tokens that are sort of device bound? I think in frontline workers, we're not seeing that as much, but there is, a real emergence of like FIDO badges, right? It's like a high level assurance, sort of a familiar form factor, high portability, satisfying some of that same sort of need about high level security assurance, and like not wanting to, maybe sync keys across infrastructure and stuff like that.
So is
we're seeing
like
some
an
of that.
NFC, like in your visual badge that you have to wear, that kind of thing?
No, like a badge, like you're used to sort of people, opening up a garage with, or opening up, walking into a door with,
badge
but there are, there is
like a hit card.
discussion. Yeah.
Okay.
But there is discussion about, this idea. I don't know if it's come up as, even, biometrics as like passive biometrics as MFA, right? if you can analyze someone's gait, you understand sort of sleeping, their circadian rhythm, you understand sort of their sort of work profile. You can use, these sort of like behavioral signals as like an MFA and maybe use that. And so if you need a little bit of a higher level of assurance for an access event to a system that holds really protected information like criminal records or, healthcare records, you can say, okay, but I have enough of these behavioral risk signals that I can sort of accept those as a sort of factor, if you would say.
And should you be customizing these per user? Like, should each user be able to select like 4 methods rather than having 12 available to everybody? So there's multiple ways to be compromised. Like, do you give people like, okay, you can select 4 of these 12?
Yeah. So, the way we think about it is that there are sort of like easy, low, sort of lower assurance authentication methods, right? And then some relatively strong side of medium assurance, authentication methods and sort of higher ones that sometimes are harder and, create some more friction. And so it's really useful to have, every user have a few of those. And then, an organization to approach it not necessarily as I really care about, I want everybody to have a facial biometric, but really say I want everybody to have a high assurance sort of authentication modality that works for them, so that you can sort of implement in a little more of an abstract way, sort of a security policy. So it's like, in this event, like you're making access, I don't usually see you on this floor accessing this sort of machine. So I need like a high level assurance authentication. And that could be FIDO badge, that could be a facial plus a passkey of some sort, something like that. And so, like doing a really strong sort of one-to-one coupling with like an authentication method is probably going to like be incredibly painful to scale. So, thinking about it sort of more conceptually and, then giving a little bit more flexibility in those scenarios where, someone may refuse to have a facial biometric stored, right? And they sort of have that right. So giving them the option to, in some scenarios, not authenticate with facial biometrics.
Yeah. Or if you worked at the OPM when that database was breached, your fingerprints are out there. So you shouldn't be using those and your employer shouldn't let you.
Yeah. Or if like someone was in a breach 30 days ago and their password was in that breach, like no longer let password work. It's like the next time that password gets used, it's probably actually not that person.
Yeah. I imagine you see a lot of stuff like there's still a lot of organizations out there with old workflows. Like is a lot of what Imprivata does, and maybe even what you specifically do. I imagine you're customer facing, helping them figure out what that flow should be. Like what the more, like say you come into an organization, everybody knows the PIN is 5768 to get into this thing, and they're just sharing that same PIN code, right? Like it just keeps random customers or patients from being able to log into the thing, but everybody knows it. And then, of course, when you have churn and employees become customers, they still know it's 5768, right?
Yeah. So in these scenarios, especially when you're talking about like sort of critical work and these, frontline access scenarios like healthcare and the justice system, you have to be really mindful of the workflow, and you have to understand it. And usually bring those stakeholders into the sort of solutioning and decision making, because if number one, they're not involved, and like number two, the easy option isn't the right option, they probably will reject it and just tell you no. And in some of those scenarios we're sort of talking about power dynamics, you might be able to forcefully implement a new security policy for in a retail sector. That still is going to be really hard, but you might be able to do that fairly well. Like doing that across a healthcare system without sort of buy-in from those workers, like the doctors and the nurses, guaranteed failure, basically. And so there's a dynamic of understanding the domain of what work they're doing, building solutions that match that. And then bringing them along, both in terms of letting them see how it works, but also just including them in that process, so that they're sort of bought in.
And I wonder how tricky is it doing the actual integration of the authentication into this application that's still running on Windows 7.
Oh man, it is
Right.
so complicated. And if you see some of these systems, like, very complex systems, so, especially that there's, organizational change. And I mean, I think you said you were going to talk about it, mergers and acquisitions and, one system, becoming a part of another system, becoming a part of another system. And so often the sort of technological and organizational debt involved in that. Plus, sort of in these operational technology environments, some machines get purchased to sort of operate for the next 20 years. And they, if they were built in 1995, they probably only support some weird password modality with rules not written by anybody anybody would understand how that works. And so
And they all require admin access, right? Like they all
almost
require
always
some level of
Yep.
crazy super admin. Like
Yep.
I'm thinking
And
about
then
like HVAC.
100%. Yes. Yeah. And it's like, there's only one account. There's only, it's like it has a user directory of one, max of one. And you're like, okay, it's just the super user. Thanks. This is great. And so, there's
We'll
a
just
lot
post
of that
an armed guard here.
Yes, exactly. In some of the manufacturing environments where it's like that, but there's like never intended to be, exposed to the internet. And then someone has a deshelled Ethernet converter and like plugs that into the network, and it's like suddenly everybody has root access to $1 million machine, something like that. So there's a lot of complication. So there's the end technology out there that you have to do the integration with, but sometimes to make that easier, a lot of these larger organizations have really complex sort of technology stacks between thin clients and VDA farms, and then applications on top of that, and then sort of authentication workflows inside of those applications. And so being able to integrate with all pieces of that sort of complex tech stack sometimes, and sometimes not, depending on which workstation you walked up to. Sometimes that'll be a thin client, sometimes that's a thick client, sometimes it's a mobile device, and sort of having it work about the same across all of those environments is OT, mobile, thin client, thick client. It gets pretty complicated.
So how do you break that down and tackle it? Right? Like do companies usually tackle a workflow at a time, and then whatever systems you encounter in that workflow you figure out as you go, or are you more trying to figure out how to integrate with some of the core systems first, and then you go after the workflows? Or I guess maybe it depends on the company. I'm curious.
Yeah, it's a little of both. A good approach that we found is sort of finding a couple of the core systems and then finding a sort of smaller subset test bed, like a floor or a department or, one of your many campuses, and sort of go there and do learning that you'll have to do. It's like, how does this company really work? How is this role really operating? How are those, and applications really working with the technology? And you build a base of success there, and then you can just sort of expand from there. So, if we're talking about hospital systems, they have 18 campuses, start at one floor at one campus and sort of grow from there to make sure that you can move with success. And we find after, one success like that, what first floor or that first campus that happens, word gets around pretty quickly. And they're like, I want this, like it sounds like your life doesn't suck right now. And you're not miserable to shift. I mean, we've done some really interesting sort of data gathering, watching for some of these frontline workers, putting in on a single shift, putting in like a password 80 times, which is like completely
you're empathizing,
insane.
You're feeling their pain. Yeah.
And it's
and then one of them gets wind that they don't have to do that ever again. And they're like, how do I get that as fast as possible?
Not all heroes wear capes, Joel. Not all heroes wear capes.
So my next question was, how do your most successful customers, how do they message this to the broader organization? And is it that the whole, celebrate small wins, point out, efficiency gains and things like that?
So it depends, right? Like stakeholders, like the messaging to stakeholders. So we often sort of talk around sort of 3 different messages, and depending on who you're talking to, some is more important. When you talk about like productivity and that like frictionless, seamless access, that's going to be the end workers themselves. They're like, what's in it for me? Why do I care? And that's a really good one. They don't care that it's more secure or any of these other things. Like, this looks like it's going to make my job easier. That's whatever. Like that's my primary. They care if things get hacked, but like that's their primary concern. When you talk to InfoSec teams, they have a hard time, giving way on security because the threat environment out there is so bad. So you're like, well, I can make it more secure. Like it's going to be more secure than a post-it note stuck to a monitor or, WhatsApp chat without all the, passwords to all the different workstations and stuff like that. So you can have this message for that sort of stakeholder that there's a security return. And then you have the sort of business in general, talking about if you're, you have high paid, doctors and nurses that are spending an hour of their time just putting in passwords every day. It's like, how much time did you get back? Like how, what does that return on investment look like? Not just in terms of money, but also like burnout and, employee satisfaction, all those things. So, we think along those three lines because they're, in any of these complex scenarios, there's always, a fair bit of variation in the stakeholders there. All of them, of course, care about each other, but often have their primary concerns.
I find the internal communication part is something that customers generally fall down on. I mean, larger companies have specific internal communications people who make sure that they understand the different profiles of stakeholders and how to talk to them and things like that. So it's probably good advice for your customers to take from you guys in terms of how to keep the momentum going.
Yeah. And they're generally pretty good. Yeah.
You have to put together a good story around personas as well. So when you map out those personas per frontline worker, per knowledge worker, whatever you have, then it's a matter of going, okay, well, Jim does this, and this is what we're going to provide for him, and Jane does these things, so this is what we're going to provide for her, and then map that across what's needed, and then it makes the selling story a lot easier, I would imagine, right?
Yeah, very much so. Right, it takes time. You have to be willing to get in there and that sort of like messiness. Sometimes that's the like last mile of messiness. Sometimes authentication platforms like, access management platforms like us don't want to mess with that. It's like, just tell me how to do OIDC or tell me how to do a SAML federation. I don't want to deal with all the other grossness that's happening. But we take a very different sort of approach to it. It's like, let's find out how this really works. Because that, from super clean standards to actual work, often there's a huge gap, and you have to be in there with people to figuring out what that gap really is, and how to solve that in order to be deeply successful.
So I also noticed from just looking at your products and your website, you also have not just internal employee options, but also options for patient authentication, for third-party access management. How much does that, again, is that like something you just discover through the workflows here, or are those entirely different products, or is kind of the goal here to come into an organization and like address all these issues as one?
Ideally, we address all those issues as one. It seems like a little bit of an odd collection of sort of populations that we're serving. But we find that those are all often the sort of populations not being served by the larger platforms. So, IT admins, third-party vendors, patients, non-employees, clinicians and frontline workers, people using shared workstations or shared mobile. These are all these really sort of very, very important, but really underserved sort of populations in our, modern world. So we really look at those. We think often when we go and talk to a customer, they probably have Microsoft, right? Like Microsoft, especially in some of these sectors, public, the justice system, manufacturing, and in particular healthcare. Microsoft is very much so a sort of foundational partner. It's like, okay, Microsoft can do some of these easy things first. Like they, have a, identity service. They have a directory store. We don't need to do that. But they're not really going to manage our non-employees well. They have no idea about SIAM and sort of like patient access. They're not going to handle your non-employees very well. And so that again sort of gets into that last mile sort of solution scenario where we figure out like what's really at the heart of the struggles, beyond those sort of foundational platforms. And often, you find shared passwords are a source of breach, third parties source of breach, patient records, incredibly important to protect. So those are also the, first places that we'd want organizations to look at, protecting, because those are going to be their big sweet spots.
Awesome. Any last thoughts before we wrap up here, Joel? It's it's a lot. Like we already talked about where people should start, but any final thoughts?
Yeah, it's just a really interesting. I think it's great that there's like new technologies coming around. I know I had a good conversation with the president of FIDO, or the CEO of the FIDO Alliance the other day about Passwordless. But like to me, I'm really just excited that modern technology is coming to these sort of underserved populations. Like we're in there with it, because it's, sometimes technology that was built in the 1970s, or, like Jackie was saying, using mainframes in retail from the 1980s is like not the best experience for sort of employees or users. So some of these new technologies that are really coming out, especially facial biometrics and other passwordless technologies, are really exciting to be able to serve those markets better.
Yeah. Joel, thank you so much for joining us on Enterprise Security Weekly today.
All right, thanks, Adrian.
Make sure you visit securityweekly.com/Imprivata and stay tuned. When we come back, we're going to hit our topic segment and talk about the economics of AI agents. AI has officially moved past the hype. The question isn't should we use AI anymore, it's how do we use it in a way that truly helps. Meet Delinea Iris AI, practical AI to secure the modern enterprise, designed to work quietly in the background, making faster, smarter access decisions, reducing risk, and giving your team time back. This isn't AI for show. It's purpose-built for identity security, boosting productivity without adding friction. Learn more at securityweekly.com/Delinea. Ransomware, supply chain attacks, 0 days. Cyber threats don't wait, and neither should your defenses. With ThreatLocker, you're not just reacting to threats, you're stopping them before they start. Our Zero Trust endpoint protection locks down your environment with pinpoint control over what's allowed to run and what's not. No guesswork, no blind spots. Just proactive, built-for-now security that keeps your business moving. Want to see how a true default deny strategy works? Head over to securityweekly.com/ThreatLocker and take the first step towards shutting the door on threats before they even knock. Welcome back to Enterprise Security Weekly. For this week's topic segment, we're discussing the economics of AI agents. I'm looking forward to this one. I actually did some prep for this one. I ran some numbers. I looked at some pricing of some products. I wanted like something tangible to grasp onto while talking about this. But we've all heard of AI agents like they don't need motivation. They don't need sleep. They can run all the time. But then I feel like nobody's asking, what's that going to cost? I think I posted something about this on LinkedIn the other day, and it got a pretty big response. Biggest response I've gotten off of LinkedIn in a while. So that struck a chord with some folks, I think. On one hand, we had people saying, well, because it's useful, it's inevitably going to get cheaper and cheaper and cheaper, right? And then without any evidence to support that claim. And then on the other side, people are like, you're totally right. We don't know how we're going to pay for this, And I feel like we're getting like we've been here before with cloud, right? Like people are like, oh, cloud is awesome. Oh no, my bill is $100,000 for last month.
Yeah,
and
seriously.
Immediately we saw cloud optimization startups and like there are companies just to manage your costs in the cloud. And by the way, Ayman Elsua is with us in some form.
Howdy. Yeah, trying out this virtual. I am your AI CISO.
I think it's a deep fake.
From the future.
I don't know. It could be a shallow fake, but it's a fake.
Well, it is using my camera movement, so there's some reality to it. But
you were going to say
worst
something.
Date
Ayman.
I've ever had in the metaverse.
I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. Yeah. No, just I hear you completely. All this is being subsidized, really. So, when the subsidization stops, or The same as cloud. I was just echoing your comments.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, so I still work as an analyst, right? So I meet with companies all day, every day. And one of the things that I've heard from multiple vendors who I work with, as they've themselves started to experiment with agentic AI in development, is holy crap, this stuff is expensive. Because, like, if you think about there's a huge cost in a modern enterprise now to adding an employee that has nothing to do with salary and benefits, right? So you're like, okay, the baseline cost just to onboard an employee is they need access to G Suite, they need access to all of these different services that you pay by the month. If you honestly think that just that what you pay by the month, your vendor's going to let that price cover the cost of that user's agent doing 10x the work theoretically, it's just not reality. And so, we have all these like, oh, you have this agent and it's going to be able to connect to this thing and this thing and this thing and this thing. And those are all going to cost money. And then, I think I mentioned this last week or the week before when we were talking about this, but the other thing is that you don't really log most of what humans do. There are interactions with technology that get logged, but a lot of what humans do on a day-to-day basis doesn't involve interacting with technology. They're doing their processing here. Right. Agents, that's not the case. So you're going to have to log every single thing these agents do and then retain those logs depending on, what kind of compliance requirements you have for years. And if we think that agentic structure is going to get more complex, more detailed, that data starts to grow exponentially. So, we may see in a year or two where, companies are working on, there's a, I used to work at Cribble. There's a Cribble for agents that streamlines their data and syncs but that's not happened yet. The closest thing I've seen is there are some companies working on a memory layer. So basically a layer of memory for agents that lays on top of all the agents that they can all access. So they're not all having to pass that memory back and forth, because that's all network traffic you have to pay for, right? Like, I can't wait to see people's VPC bills. I just can't wait to see the look on people's faces and their logging cost for VPC. Because most places don't even log VPC. They either don't log VPC at all, or they turn it off at the end of the month if they're bumping up against their Splunk license, right? And so, like, these bills are going to be insane. And vendors are the only ones actually running these things right now. And that's what I've heard. So I don't know. And then again, if you look at how much value has been baked into the market and how much productivity these things would have to generate just to meet that value, it's unrealistic.
Well, cloud is the example, and I think cloud is probably the solution for this, at least for the short term. Looking at subscription models where you pay for a certain number of agents or a bundle of agents, and then that gets kind of dispersed and used as this agent cloud by employees, and maybe you have different groups or tiers of employees where they have access to a certain number of agents over a certain amount of time to do their job, and they have to justify if they need 5 agents or 10 agents that they have to run over the course of the month, not necessarily running the whole time, but kind of like a virtual machine or virtual instance in cloud where you don't necessarily need it to run the whole month. So you turn it off when you're not using it. You pause that agent. I like the idea of a memory sort of abstraction layer to share that information and pass it back and forth. Certainly, I think one of the big things that is going to have to get figured out sooner rather than later is what user context does the agent run under? Is it acting on behalf of the user? Is it acting as a user? Or does it have another machine identity, which we have had these things called service accounts for years, and they've been mismanaged for years. We're going to end up in the same situation with these agents, and how having an agent context of what they're doing. And if they're doing things under the context of a machine account, which is likely, then that has to get logged. That does have to go to Splunk, and they have to figure out how to manage and understand, did this agent do something it wasn't supposed to, or was the person behind the agent telling it to go ahead and do this thing? Like, why did it do that thing that it did, that we know that it did because we got that logged?
I think just like the previous conversation we had about MFA and different authentication options, the answer is going to be everything you just mentioned, Sean. Just based on what's best for whatever workflow you're building or whatever you're trying to automate with an AI agent.
Yeah, I mean,
But
Okta proposed a sort of solution for this. So at Octane, they announced cross-app access, and that's when somebody's doing something on, as the user, and it gives them, if they're authenticated into Okta, then it gives them access to all the apps that user has access to in Okta at the authorization levels the user has. But that's one solution, right? And that's kind of what I'm talking about, though, is that like, how do you price that? How do you price authentication? Because normally you charge on a per seat basis monthly, right? But how do you price an agent that spins up for 10 milliseconds to do something ephemeral and then disappears? Do you charge just an enhanced monthly access? But if that, how do you charge for somebody whose agent's doing a million things a day versus, is it tokens? There are no economic models we can look to right now. From my perspective, you guys may disagree, but I can't think of a business that has enough parallels to agentic AI that we've figured out a pricing model for. Because I don't even think cloud pricing we've necessarily figured out
No,
the
we
best
haven't.
model for. I mean, how many companies do you know that have freemium tiers that are just abused?
Yeah. So I did some research, and everything seems to be consumption based, even when they, like, some of them try and hide it though. They will throw out like a monthly rate. But then you sign up and you find there's actually a limit to how much you can use it for $20 a month. And at some point, if you want to keep using it, they're going to upsell you to another plan that has a higher limit, or they're just going to, like in the case of Cursor, I was looking at Cursor, you just pay for your overages, just like using a cell phone or something like that, like an old school
You get
cell
a certain
phone
amount
plan.
of minutes per month.
You run out of minutes and they just charge you a premium for extra. But I found some interesting stuff. Like, one of the things I found just on Reddit, looking at people complaining about their cost, asking like how to keep the cost down, is that a lot of people don't understand that this model costs 10x more than this model, and they don't need to use it for everything. So there's a lot that I think people are going to have to learn about what model does different things best, and there's going to be all these different profiles and switching. Well, when I'm doing this, when it's looking for bugs, I'm going to use this model, with this token size, and like there's going to be, hopefully they simplify it somewhat. Like maybe eventually you have something that just picks the best parameters for you. But right now it looks like folks using Cursor and stuff like this have to do a bunch of experimentation and figure out, okay, like this really cheap model is good enough for doing this one thing that I want to do. But then for this other thing, I need a reasoning model, and I've got to switch up the parameters. Like one of these, like somebody was posting, like he was like, my money is gone like in hours. My whole monthly plan is done in like 2 or 3 hours, and everybody in the responses are like, dude, that is the most expensive model with like the most expensive this, the most expensive that you could possibly do. So yeah, no wonder it's $7 a prompt.
Yeah, 100%. I actually ran into this. So there's a few things here. One is learning how to use the right model, and also writing your prompts in such a way that it's effective. So kind of like writing the spec. Actually, it's a whole kind of thing of like spec-driven development, where you kind of take the time ahead of time to write the spec, and you might use like off-the-shelf model to do that, which is cheaper, and then have a more expensive model, a smarter model to do the actual building. But yeah, you have like for example, Replit has, it's Agent 3. They have max mode, and max mode is like 200 minutes of runtime. So you just let the agent run, and it's just like run. and
that max mode, Cursor has it too, and that's what this user is doing.
Yeah, and so you just have this bill, and it's I think it's an art. It's an art. You have like Open Router that will, I guess they buy the tokens in bulk, or I just need to know how it works. But so it's kind of like going on the family plan for your cell phone provider, maybe, right? So it's an art, and but it creeps up, and if you don't know how to do it right, you'll. But I do have to say, I mean, I know a guy. He's been playing with a prototype, building like a content creation like suite, and he's probably spent around maybe $1,000 so far. But he said like it probably would have cost $50K with a developer, right? So,
Right. And it's, again, with the cloud, like there are companies that lifted and shifted into the cloud and they complained about how expensive it was, but like nothing was optimized when it was in their data center. They didn't care that they were using a quad Xeon with 192 gigs of RAM to run a Python script, but the moment you get into the cloud, it's like, well, you don't even need an EC2 instance for that. Like there's a service where you can just run scripts and you don't manage the OS layer or anything like that.
Right.
Why does
you just got really far away.
Eamon's avatar looks like it just stole my purse and it's trying to
and it's running away.
That's great.
Well,
with Microsoft having built building a data center with a large number of NVIDIA chips, and with Amazon having a huge AWS data center in Indiana that is partially built and expanding more broadly, I think we're going to have to get into the realm of AI compute. Whoever pays for that. I mean, Anthropic is partnered with Amazon, and so they're using the Amazon data center that I just mentioned. And Microsoft has a huge partnership with OpenAI, and OpenAI is pretty much guaranteed to use Azure, so that makes sense for them. I think at some point there's going to be some AI compute, and at some point there's going to be some minutes. There's got to be some way that it's targeted where it makes sense for people to figure it out. A nice calculator to go, here's how you can do this, and here's how you can be effective with it. But I think it is going to come down to how you use it and what prompts you use. I mean, because it's different than other things that we're used to. Cloud, you spin up an instance, you have something there, or you spin up a Docker container and you run something there.
Yeah. And I've heard nobody's making money either at this point. Somebody I saw somebody said 100% of Cursor's revenue goes to Anthropic, right?
Yeah.
Like it's just all inference costs.
It's monopoly money just handed around in a big circle.
Yeah, and we shared that chart a couple weeks ago. That's basically like NVIDIA in I think Eamon or Sean
trading around.
Shared. Yeah, because NVIDIA's investing all of this money that it's got because of its stock has appreciated so much. And that's the insanity of, the whole taco phenomenon, is that there is such an investment at an administrative level in the US right now in keeping the market going up and to the right, that all of these crazy tech companies, I heard the other day, I heard this, and I don't think I really understood this until now, but there are 7 companies that make up 65% of the S&P 500.
Yeah, I heard the same thing. Yeah.
Yeah, you probably listened to the same, what was it, New York Times or one of the podcasts, and it's just
it was a post on Mastodon, I think. But yeah, it's making the rounds. Yeah.
Yeah, there was the New York Times.
Because NVIDIA just hit 5 trillion.
Yeah, but the question is why?
Right.
So even if they're trading at growth company, like even if they're trading at say 10 or 15x price to earnings, they're not earning that much money. And the only reason they have billions to invest in other companies is because their stock is so appreciated. So to Sean's point, it's basically like Pokemon cards are running the market right now because this money doesn't exist.
It's all IOUs. Right.
Yeah.
They're NFTs.
Yeah.
They just hand around.
And so the couple things I bitch about, one, yes, the inefficiencies, Adrian, to your point, like I was so mad when people were using LLMs for things like generating code, because I'm like, Cursor is meant for that. An LLM is a stupid way to try to generate anything complex. You need things more specialized. And that was why I got really excited about agentic AI. I was like, awesome. We can stop using these large language models for deterministic things because they don't need to be used that way. It just needs to be an interface between the customer and the better AI models that are happening in the background, right? But the other thing here is supply chain. And I know I always complain about this as well. Intel just released earnings, last day or two? And one of the big things they cited was physical supply chain issues, in that we only have so many generators. We only have so many chips. We only have so many commercial industrial chillers to liquid cool these chips. And there are a lot of things happening because of that in the market. Everything from we're trying to make them faster. We're sourcing them from different countries. We're having people build them who have never built them before, which is causing quality issues across every hyperscaler. And so they're just all of these physical realities of cloud computing that nobody's taking into account. And then if we think we're going to move all of that stuff back to the edge, which is, I did an interview with Dell and AMD, I don't know when, a couple days ago. I'm in a time warp, but basically about how we're going to have to do a lot of the stuff that we've been doing in the cloud at the edge for a number of reasons. One is that AI scaled attacks that are happening at the edge. If you wait until that hits the cloud to detect them, you're done, right? Mm-hmm. So we have to be able to stop things at the edge. But the other thing was, we can't afford to do these jobs in the cloud forever. They're going to have to come back to the edge because that compute is basically free other than the electricity it uses, right? So I hope for NVIDIA that their $5 trillion valuation is worth it. And I think there have been times that we've argued that other companies weren't worth it and they've just kept growing. But this just feels like it's one of those things where, so in trading and stock trading, there are all these things like the head and shoulders formation, the double bottom formation. There's all these chart formations that are supposed to mean things. And they only mean things because everybody makes the same trade when the chart does that thing. So if everybody agrees that this is a sign of a top and they all start selling, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. And that really feels like what's happening in the market right now, is that everybody has to keep buying into this. Otherwise, the whole thing falls down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So aside from the bubble itself, and we'll tomorrow or next year at some point, we'll see what happens with that. I think as long as this is useful, and clearly it's useful, the only question is, how is it going to be used? How is it going to be consumed? Like, do all the developers end up just using more efficient local models with their own GPU and stop paying other people for it, right? And we kind of seen this with cloud as well, where, now a lot of companies who've been using cloud for over a decade often use a mix of hardware that they own, in their own data centers or in colos. Maybe they just use the cloud for scaling at certain times a year when they need more capability. But I think AI is going to follow a lot of what we've seen with cloud, and we'll just see people experimenting with. You know what? I used the smallest DeepSeek model on my laptop with a very modest GPU, and it works fine, right? So I'm going to stop paying OpenAI and Anthropic for resources.
Yeah, I don't know if you saw.
I really wonder what's going to happen.
Sorry, go ahead, Eamon.
Oh, no. I really wonder what's going to happen when people take that shift. So it's, I don't know if it's a if, but maybe when. Yeah. Go ahead, Jackie.
Also, Cursor's $20 a month for the Pro license, but if you want to use their bug bot, it's twice as expensive. It's $40 a month on top of that $20 a month. If you want to do security stuff,
that's crazy.
If you want to find and fix bugs,
there's an article from a couple days ago. Brian, I don't know if he pronounces it Merchant or Merchant because I came from a French Canadian place, but in Wired magazine, or I guess it's a website now. God, I'm old. He wrote an article that's called "AI is the Bubble to Burst Them All," where he basically interviewed a couple economists who wrote a book called "Bubbles and Crashes: The Boom and Bust of Technological Innovation." They're from the University of Maryland, and basically they said that there are 4 things that quantify a bubble: uncertainty, pure play, novice investors, and then coordination or alignment of beliefs through narratives. And he actually compares it to the radio bubble of the early 1900s. And I am really ashamed.
I didn't know there was a radio bubble.
Thank you. I have an economics and finance degree. I had worked as an economist, and I didn't know that there was a radio bubble. So this is a really interesting article. I pasted it in our Slack channel so you can add it to the show notes. But the kind of TLDR of it is this has not just all of the characteristics of a bubble. It has the characteristics of a larger bubble than anything we've seen before. And, I can't see how this is not accurate, because even if we do, let's say all of our agentic dreams come true, we figure out how to run these things, power and water alone. Every 100 prompts you put into ChatGPT is 116 fluid ounce bottle of water. So even if these things all start to work, utility costs will go up so much for everybody in the developed world that will cripple them, right?
Well,
so
that's been shown.
Sorry,
there's a study done on that, looking at a population where a data center moved in, and over 5 years, the price of electricity went up 237%.
Yeah, because when you got to pay to bury those massive, heavy transmission lines, you got to pass that cost on. That was one of the reasons that Tucson voted against the Project Blue Amazon data center down here, is they were going to have the water company pay I think it was like 12 miles of water line that they needed to put in to get to this data center. And the water company was going to pay for that through rates. And they were trying to be like, oh, don't worry. It'll pay off in the long term. Like, no, I don't think so. We already have to get our water from Colorado. Like, literally, the water in Arizona comes from the CAP, the Colorado Aqueduct Project. And from the Colorado River, we have like 200 miles of aqueduct that bring water to Arizona. Like, we really need to be giving that to Jeff Bezos. Right. Sorry, Amazon.
All right. That is all the time we have for the segment here. In fact, I'm going to have to steal some time from the news segment. We're a little bit over. But yeah, I think very timely to talk about this now. Particularly, I think we'll talk about this a bit in the news. But like, the use of AI is crazy too. Like 90% of developers, something like 80% of management, of like senior management. So it's something we're going to have to deal with sooner rather than later.
Yeah.
All right. And with that, we'll be back in a few moments with the weekly enterprise news. Do your end users always, and I mean always, without exception, work on company-owned devices and IT-approved apps? I didn't think so. So my next question is, how do you keep your company's data safe when it's sitting on all those unmanaged apps and devices? 1Password has an answer to this question: Extended Access Management. 1Password Extended Access Management helps you secure every sign-in for every app on every device, because it solves the problems traditional IAM and MDM can't touch. Check it out at securityweekly.com/1Password. Identity and access management is hard. Whether it's administering identities, managing and controlling access, building, implementing, and enforcing policies, or governing the whole thing, IAM is often the realm of inefficient processes, bloated implementation timelines, and expensive and complex projects that struggle to solve problems. Thanks to Junto, those challenges can be a thing of the past. Junto delivers a full-stack IAM platform with a microservices architecture that delivers all of the functionality your unique environment demands, and an implementation model built for rapid and relevant time to value without requiring specialized staff and skills. Learn more at securityweekly.com/Junto. Welcome back to Enterprise Security Weekly. Now for the Enterprise Security Weekly news. You can check out securityweekly.com/ESW431 if you want to follow along as we go through the news, or for links to the articles that we're covering today. And we're probably not going to make it through everything. I just threw a bunch of funding in here. We're not going to cover all of it, not going to cover all the acquisitions. But Sublime Security raised $150 million in Series C funding. Heard a lot of good things about Sublime, email security platform. Of course, they're now calling it an agentic email security platform because of course they are. That's how they get $150 million. And ChainGuard raised a $280 million debt financing round. Man, people will pay anything to get rid of vulnerability management.
Well, so what they do is really cool. And it's a value play. And I full disclosure, I hosted their conference earlier this year. So I'm not unbiased. I really like the team, but the tech is cool, right? It's one of these like minimalistic kind of hardened container solutions. And I was actually going to mention ChainGuard in our previous segment about data center costs because I was like, there's probably going to be the version of ChainGuard or Minimus, or there's a number of companies who do this for agents where they're like, hey, to your point, you're using this massive model, you only need a small one, or you've got 95 dependencies for this agent, you only need 10, that kind of thing. So I think this is one of those, like when people spin up containers, they generally spin them up with 90% of what they don't need. Same thing with data scientists. When I start, a Python file for data science, I just import everything I can possibly think of that I could ever possibly want. And if that stuff doesn't get stripped out, you just have a lot of attack surface that's not necessary.
Yeah, it's funny. I was looking at Minimus is a direct competitor with ChainGuard, and their web pages look identical.
Yeah, yeah. I interviewed Kat
like
Dodson
the screenshot of the product, like same graph, same placement of the graph on the screenshot. It's crazy.
Yeah, they're Minimus is, I think her title is head of developer advocacy. Kat, I interviewed her at Black Hat, and she's actually works on Kubernetes and is like has a huge role to play in maintaining Kubernetes. Both great companies, both super cool teams. And again, I think the reason they've done well is that when you minimize your containers, you also greatly reduce your cost and your attack surface. So
right. Yeah. So to explain what these companies do, basically, if you don't want to have to manage your own container images, like making sure all the open software within the container is up to date, checking for vulnerabilities, patching those vulnerabilities, all that stuff. But also to Jackie's point, minimizing waste, pulling out all the stuff that doesn't need to be in there. Which, especially at scale with containers, is going to save energy. It's going to save processing, and so you actually get lower costs, lower energy use, and less attack surface, less security issues. And it's not cheap. I'm trying to remember the amount that I heard, but it is 5 digits for them to manage an image for you. At least ChainGuard. I have to imagine competitors to ChainGuard, because they're the first ones doing this, have to be trying to win on pricing, because they're all doing effectively the same thing, I think.
Yeah.
Yep. Very cool. So they've got almost $1 billion in total funding at this point. So that's crazy.
Yeah.
For such a specific thing, but it is like vulnerability management is just like the most broken, worst problem that companies don't want to deal with. So that they're willing to outsource that problem.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Oh, there's another one listed here that I don't. So KeyCard is on here too. They raised $30 million. I actually interviewed Ed Sim last week at the AI Security Summit. It was like a sneak and AI engineer event, and he was one of their like pre-seed investors, I think. So he had great things to say about them. I have not interacted with the company specifically, though.
Yeah, build, connect, and adopt trusted AI agents. So, Sean, maybe this speaks to some of what you were talking about earlier, what they're trying to address here. It's keycard.sh, which is a beautiful domain name. I love that domain name. But yeah, and they're Canada-based, and they must have just come out of stealth, because they also announced their seed at the same time that they announced their Series A. So I think the total is actually like $38 million in funding that they have with both combined.
Yeah, I think Ed did the seed.
Oh yeah, no, it is listed there. I just have it listed on separate lines. Yeah, $8 million seed. Data Miner picked up a company called Threat Connect, threat intelligence platform. Yeah, is it? No, that's a different one. This is Threat Quotient. I have a little rhino sitting on my desk. I get the threat companies mixed up. And Jump Cloud picked up a company called Breeze with a Z, and so BREEZ. Identity threat detection and response platform, which makes sense because Jump Cloud is in the identity and directory management space. Also kind of MDM, I guess. They do a bunch of stuff. It's kind of like, if you don't want to pay for Active Directory, Entra ID, Intune, all that Microsoft stuff, it's an alternative for mid-sized companies. All right. In the vibe check, the question that was asked in this edition of the Security Funded newsletter, which is where we get all this stuff from, was what's the real reason most orgs don't have AI governance yet? And the most common answer, overwhelmingly, was that it's too esoteric. Companies don't actually understand the risks.
Yeah.
And I guess that's unsurprising with AI just shoved into everything. Yeah. How do you do governance when it's a product, it's a feature, it's a role, it's an agent?
Yeah.
There's
Well,
a
and
lot
also,
going on.
and I guess I don't know if we're talking broad based, like everything from what employees can and can't use, ChatGPT and things for, to governance of, but also it's still in development in most places, right? Like it's just a theory. The vast majority of AI tech outside LLMs that people are going to be used, I don't think have been successfully deployed. So yes, I think governance and policies and things like that always lag tech, but I also think it's another indicator that people really aren't at production stage with any of this stuff.
All right. The next item here is called Do Cloud Wrong, 7 Red Flags Your Strategy Needs a Reset. And, this kind of popped up on my radar after the AWS outage. But yeah, I mean, you could swap cloud with AI here. And I think most of the things that they call out, your bill always surprises you. You keep buying tools, but nothing actually changes. Security slows down everything or gets bypassed. There's no shared roadmap. I think 100% of this you could just swap AI for, and it would work.
Well, I swear it was either I think it was 2 weeks before this AWS outage. We were talking about this on air, and I was like, this creates crazy dependencies. We also talked about this when we talked about the outage of port 443 and the Great Firewall in China. They blocked all traffic on 443 for a couple hours. And we were like, if that happened here, literally every AI service would just stop working. And nobody has a backup to 443 configured, right? So this is the same thing in I don't know. This is so crazy to me too, because I built this Minecraft music festival on AWS, and I had only ever worked as a data scientist on AWS, and multi-region was like the first thing we set up because it's one of the first things in the AWS docs. And so like the fact that there were so many people who had such a basic thing misconfigured is pretty indicative of where marketing likes to set our technology level versus where reality shows that our technology level actually is. Like fine-grained access control my ass if you don't even have multi-region set up in AWS.
Well, it depends on what you need, right? If you don't need high availability for a function, do you really care if AWS goes down for 8 hours once every 2 years? Maybe not. Yeah, is it worth spending triple the amount of money and then adding all that complexity, all the other things that can go wrong when you set up high availability and multi-region? Like you're adding a lot of cost, a lot of complexity. You need people who know how to do it properly. So you really better need it, right? To want to step into all that, I imagine.
Or maybe just move to US East 2.
Shh, that's a secret. You're not supposed to. or Oregon, right? West 1 or whatever.
I'm a bullshit magnet. So for me, it's more like you really better be sure you're not going to need anything in that 8 hours. Because the number of times that I have to say, what are the fucking chances about something are so high that I would be the person that has I don't need this service, no big deal. And during that 8 hours, something critical.
Well, and some of them only exist there. IAM only exists in US East 1. Route 53 only exists in US East 1. And apparently that's built like that intentionally. So, regardless of what regions you're using, it's going to happen.
Is it because we assume that if Virginia is geographically not okay and it's that close to our capital that nobody's going to be okay? Like, why do we think everything is cool to just sit in Virginia? There's something about Virginia that I apparently don't understand.
It's where a lot of the internet connectivity is for the world.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
So that's why a third of the data centers in the United States are in Virginia.
Yep.
Yeah.
I've done a lot of audits in Virginia. Yeah.
Seems like a concentrated point of risk.
It is.
Yeah, it is. It absolutely is. And then Azure had an issue the other day, didn't it? I don't think we have it in here, but I believe Azure had a bit of a hiccup.
Yeah, and it was DNS.
With some things. And
Same
it was
thing.
DNS.
Yep.
Yeah, somebody, and of course, it's more complex than just DNS. DNS is a huge factor, and like with the AWS one at least, and leads to these kind of cascading effects on different products. But they describe it as a DynamoDB service disruption. So I think it's one of these things where it didn't have to be DNS, like it just happened to be DNS, but they, if they had done a better job making DynamoDB more resilient, DNS shouldn't have impacted it. But then once DynamoDB was impacted, then other things were impacted.
Yeah, based on what I read, it was basically the escalator had a hiccup and was adding older SOPs or things that it needed to add. And so then there were cascading failures based on that. It's pretty interesting.
So I actually went out and I noticed AWS had a page where they had all the breaches, all the major breaches that they've had over the years. So going back to 2011, I grabbed all those and threw them into a spreadsheet and started pulling some insights out of them. And I posted about it on LinkedIn, but found some interesting stuff. Like it's not always DNS. Only 2 of those out of 18 major incidents, only 2 were DNS. 4 of them were power loss. Were from power losses, which James Hamilton, distinguished engineer at AWS. If you ever go to an analyst, the analyst event that they put on before reInvent, if they still cart him out for that to give a talk, he's fascinating to listen to. But one of the things he talks about is the reason why they run custom firmware on their diesel generators. And that's because by default, diesel generators will shut down to protect their internal components. And AWS does not want that. They want them to tear themselves apart because it is cheaper than having to pay customers for downtime.
Wow.
Yep.
Yeah. What else did I find from that? It is always US East 1. Asia Pacific Northeast 1 had 2 outages, and all the other regions that had outages only had one once. So it is mostly US East 1. Let's see. And the reason, so I also track back like why did these occur? And internal software bugs was the number 1 reason. Number 2 is power failure. Number 3 was third-party software bug. So you add the software bugs together, and that's exactly 50% of it are software bugs. Human error, only behind 2 of the 18. Process issues, only behind 2 of the 18. So AWS does process very well. But yeah, when you're running at scale, I guess you're going to find weird bugs.
You're going to fail at scale.
Especially
you're
if
going
you
to
have a
fail
bunch
at
of
scale.
brain drain. I think one of the things that Amazon has suffered from quite a bit the last couple of years is a significant number of tenured engineers left. One of the kind of postmortems I read
I've been
was
hearing
all
about
about
that.
brain drain and how many people were pulled away to OpenAI and Microsoft and Facebook, and with all of these hiring, AWS wasn't
offering
as
$1 million salaries and crap like that.
Well, and again, the appreciated stock. All of these companies have this massively appreciated stock so that they can offer these engineers, like $10 million bonuses that are in stock. And as long as they fire them before the first year, they don't have to pay them any of it.
That's insane.
Yeah.
That's insane. So the link to the spreadsheet that I put together is just a Google sheet, is wide open. I included the link in the show notes. You can go grab that and go play with that data if you want to. It's got the regions, even the day of the week. So it's not always Friday. That was one of the other
Monday or Sunday night.
Yeah, it was. And it was Tuesday's most common, Thursday is second most common, and then Friday. But it's got duration in there. It's got all kinds of data for you to play around with. Cyber threats follow a familiar path, an attack chain reused across the globe. Fortra knows how the enemy operates, so you can stay one step ahead. Our advanced security solutions detect, disrupt, and defeat threats at every stage, protecting your data, business, and customers. With Fortra at your side, the battle ends before it begins. Visit securityweekly.com/Fortra to see how you can get total attack chain coverage. All right. The next two here, number 3 and number 4, I discovered at the same time, and I actually prepped these for Application Security Weekly, but we ended up not doing the news when I hosted ASW earlier this week. So I simply moved them to Enterprise Security Weekly because they're really interesting, and I wanted to talk about them. But both from, I forget Filippo's full name. I follow him on Mastodon. And so the standard of care is basically like a very high baseline for open source, managing open source securely. And I thought it was really interesting. Basically talks about how they do things, and like you don't have to do it exactly like it's in the standard, but it gives you ideas like what are the kinds of attacks they're protecting against? How do they set things up so that they're either resilient or like passively protected from certain types of attacks? Like we've seen GitHub Actions abused quite a bit, and they do some things there. So really just an interesting list to go over. And that standard was influenced by his analysis. Filippo did some analysis of a bunch of open source supply chain compromises. So that's the next story here. And just really short XZ utils. Here's what happened. Here's what the root cause was. Here's some contributing factors. So really useful list of how a bunch of open source and supply chain got compromised.
Yeah. Patient threat actors.
Yeah,
XZ
I found it
utils, that
interesting.
dude contributed productively for 2 years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I shouldn't say dude, person.
Utils. One of them, GitHub token extracted from a binary. That's kind of badass. Like somebody's just scanning binaries. I wonder if there's creds in here, just hitting some binaries with strings.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting the amount of times that the developer gave the attacker access to the environment.
Yeah, phishing. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, verify your account phishing, email verification phishing, phishing attack on the credentials for publishing NPM packages. Yeah. Crates.io phishing. Yeah, I mean, yeah, we know the human. I mean, when you have these really dependent packages, these really popular packages, and it's just one person managing it in their spare time, cartoonists nail it. Like that XKCD cartoon really nails it. With that one person in Oklahoma, Indiana. I forget exactly what the cartoon says, but open source supply chain really is like that. Software supply chain is really that vulnerable.
And occasionally anonymous, which makes it really dangerous, because how are you going to know if that one person in Indiana has a heart attack?
Yeah, it's a bus factor of 1, right?
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, who's got the ability to take over? Yeah, and in some cases, like they recognize that, and they found people, that they can pass off to if something happens to them. But it's a weird thing to have in your like estate planning. Like I give my open source packages to my nephew.
Yeah.
Something else I thought would be interesting to discuss is number 7 here. And the reason I pulled this out, so this is Anthropic basically talking about why they can't put out an AI browser because there's so many problems to solve. And of course, Anthropic is the more cautious of, I think they've established themselves as the more cautious of the AI companies here. But I pulled it out because basically this August 26th blog post that they published basically lists every problem we've heard about every AI browser in the last month. And I included some of those as well. Just from SC Media, we've seen, I think that's seven different posts about issues with AI powered browsers.
Yeah. I'm interested in why some of these companies think that this isn't, well, I'm not interested because currently we don't have a really strict regulatory environment. But after Google was almost meant to divest from Chrome, I don't know why you would want to add a browser. One, nobody uses browsers anymore. And two, like, wouldn't that create the potential for a monopoly where if one of your competitors manages to get on the administration's good side and convince them that you shouldn't be able to own both an LLM and a browser, like you could potentially have the FTC on you? I don't know. I think like browsers of all thing are just like the most bizarre. And I guess the reason is because it's a duopoly, right? Kind of a monopoly, but so there's a potential for disruption there. It just seems like the least exciting thing that some of these companies could be working on. And if these things are really going to start working the way we think they are, and we're mostly going to be interacting them with voice and agents, why is a browser important other than collecting data?
Well, the next
they're charging for it.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
It costs money.
Yeah.
Well, the next step's going to be though too, OS, right?
Oh God, kill me.
So, ChatGPT OS.
Yeah.
The more data they can get, I mean, that's how it works. So, yeah.
But the at least for
So they could clone us.
For Perplexity, like you have to pay for it. Like it is a freemium model, but after a certain point, you have to pay. You get a certain amount of AI credits to use.
From a vibe coding. Oh, sorry. From a vibe coding perspective, like for using Atlas, for example, since now Codex can have access to the browser, it can do the troubleshooting, right? So that's been like the big missing piece with a lot of these, like, with the Cursor 2.0, it has a browser built in. So browser's been that like missing piece for AI to get more, I guess, interactive with you, I guess, in what you're doing. But yeah.
Oh, it's also going to make it way easier to develop automated actions on the browser.
Yes.
So, because we talked about these last week, I think there are some now that can, navigate the web and click, but the technology is really shitty.
Playwright and Firecrawl, there's scripts. You have to write scripts, but it's another tool that you have to set up. And now it could be native.
Yeah. Interesting. So for things that you can't scrape, for things that you're blocking scrapers, if you build a browser.
Or subscription access to a website, maybe,
The thing I liked about Anthropic and what they did was they actually had they red teamed the browser extension in a autonomous mode, and so they're releasing this Chrome extension to a small number of people as a pilot to get feedback, so they can also identify and see what other issues there are. They were able to reduce the percentage of malicious actions from what they did with the red teaming engagement from 26 to I think 12. And then there was another grouping of things that they looked at that were attacks against the browser, and they were able to reduce that with some guardrails. So I like this approach of, okay, we're going to make it available to a small number of users. that we want feedback on it. We're going to invest in some security guardrailing. And then before we release this to the world, we're going to make sure that we have some really good security guardrails to protect against it. And one example that they had was basically as Adrian mentioned, the things that we've seen with others, where there's a URL that gets pasted in, and the URL actually has a break in it, so that it's not a URL; it's actually a command for the LLM. Well, that's a problem. The other thing is when there's information for the LLM to perform an action, and now it's got access to your email in a web browser, it can delete all your email. So there's got to be guardrails around those sort of actions and activities.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, all the different ways you can do prompt injection, like it's almost endless. It's,
Yes.
I suspect every month from now until eternity, we will see new evasion techniques, new prompt injection techniques that get around existing guardrails. I've got a couple other things in here. I think we're going to skip to the squirrel story, but I just want to mention there's a good story. Number 6, self-hosted alternatives. Just another trend I've been seeing. More and more people running stuff at home. Trying to remove dependence on cloud providers.
Number 9 sounds like a terrible sequel to The Prestige.
It is supremely stupid. It is so 23andMe's data theft victims offer genetic monitoring to ward off hackers.
Yeah, this is like if you want to make sure that you're not being killed during a magic trick in the next 10 years, they're going to scan genetic monitoring.
They're going to scan for your genetic data to see if it shows up on the dark web, and then what? What's going to ward off hackers? And what are hackers going to do with your genetic data anyway?
I just told you they're going to clone you for a magic trick. Have you not seen The Prestige? Oh shit! I just ruined that movie. But.
Yeah, there was another movie that came out around the same time called The Illusionist, so you can watch.
I'll add a spoiler warning to the show notes.
Sorry, guys. The movie's like 10 years old. If you haven't already seen it, you're a lame.
And speaking of spoiling things, I guess we will cover the next dumpster fire, which is CIA's Cryptos puzzle. And the reason it's a dumpster fire is the creator doesn't want to die before the whole thing is out there and people can appreciate his art or whatever. So they're auctioning off. They already have an auction house picked out to auction off the final clues so you can like fully understand it. And basically some folks realized that some of his stuff was taken in by the Smithsonian, and he left some notes in there. And so they just pulled the plain text for the answer for the last piece of the puzzle from his notes in the Smithsonian archive, which is available to the public or whatever. So
that was fascinating. 2 journalists did that, so they did some investigative journalism. They figured out what
hacking,
it was.
Ignored the rules.
And so the artist has requested that Smithsonian actually isolate and hold that away from the public for 50 years.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah, basically, because like you don't fully understand, like you have to understand how you solve the problem to fully appreciate or whatever. But I love that they just kind of like beat Mario 64 by glitching through some stairs, right? I love it because it's just that's the classic hacker mindset. Like, I bet this guy kept some notes somewhere. Where are his notes? Oh, the Smithsonian has them. Let's go check it out.
And the thing I love about that, it was the auction that actually got them the idea that he had notes in the Smithsonian. So this whole auction thing was what started this process to take place.
Well, and it also shows the dichotomy of the hacker community, because half of people are like, great, like they went around, they found the answer, but the other half are like, yeah, but you didn't follow the rules. Like, it's not picking a lock if you break the lock to get it open, right? So like, it's because I already saw at the end of this article, there are people who are like, yeah, but they didn't really do it.
I love it. I love the argument too. It's hilarious. All right, our squirrel story. Moving to our squirrel story. This is really a visual thing. Surely by now you've seen in some headlines or in some videos on YouTube. If you haven't, go check out. The name of the company is 1X, just a number 1 and the letter X. And the name of the product is Neo, the home robot. So this is very much like a Jetsons type of, this is intended to be like a robot that goes around the house, does chores for you, that kind of thing. Like this thing we've been seeing in Popular Science 75 issues ago, right? It's finally here, kinda. There's a catch. Who wants to talk about the catch? Jackie, talk about the catch. No, Sean. Sean seems very excited.
Yes. So basically there's a human that's controlling it on the other side. And that's why this thing is $20,000 to buy or $5.99 a month. But you're committed to a 6-month time frame. So basically when you say, go get me a glass of water, there's a person on the other side that's actually controlling the robot to take it over to get that glass of water and then bring it to you. And it's got 2 eyes. So it's got stereoscopic vision. It has hands. So it can pick up and put things away. And what's really interesting is it took about 5 minutes to put 2 glasses and a fork into the dishwasher and close the dishwasher.
It is so it is remarkable in some ways. Like some of what they've done is really remarkable. Like from an engineering standpoint, you can appreciate this thing is a ninja. It's what, like 22 decibels? Like, I don't even know what 22 decibels sounds like that would not wake you up.
It would if it was standing over you in your bedroom.
I know, it's scary.
Yeah. So this thing would make a great assassin. So that's terrifying.
Did they not see the movie
It only
Megan?
weighs 60 pounds. And,
Yes.
and I know because I work out, I can easily throw 60 pounds out of a window.
Nice.
So at least I know that. And it's really slow. So I can beat one up if I need to.
And it'll only lift 150 pounds.
Not if I'm asleep and it sneaks up on me.
Right.
Yeah.
That's why you lock your door at
this
night.
is just like robo-taxis. Like it's come out multiple times that like upwards of 75% of like high skill interactions in Waymos and robo-taxis, or it's literally just somebody driving the car from a couple 100 miles away, right? I went and looked at the locations of this company just to see where you could get labor cheap enough that $600 a month would be worth somebody driving a robot around your house. And it says they have locations headquartered in Palo Alto. Then they have Oslo, Norway, Irving, Texas, and
the founder's Norwegian,
Germany?
I think.
Yeah, I believe the founder's Norwegian.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Moss, Viken, NO. Is that Norway? Yeah, so 2 different locations in Norway. So I want to know where the people controlling the robot are sitting.
Right.
Because that's also a security threat, right? Is like if you're paying people in a completely different country. Yeah, I don't know. The whole
Yeah, and
thing's
key
weird.
to this is that they want to bring this out and be able to train their AI with what the people are actually doing, how this machine will work, and how it'll interact with its environment
to remove the dependency, right?
Right.
It's a Rosie.
Eventually.
Right.
Yeah.
Eventually, but it's a human Turk right now.
It reminds me of the movie Robot and Frank. Anybody ever saw that?
No, I haven't seen that.
Oh, good movie. Yeah, fun movie.
Yeah, so they say they put some privacy controls in place here. It's really interesting. There's a Wall Street Journal article out there, and she really puts the screws to them, asks them some tough questions. She reveals the fact that she hasn't seen this robot do a single thing without, and wait for it, the name of the person driving the robot, in her case, where she was testing it out, is named Turing. His first name is Turing, as in Turing test.
Like the
No shit. So supposedly people are blurred by it, so if you're walking around naked in your house, again, supposedly, we know how well
faces
these
are blurred,
kinds of,
but I don't know about the rest of the anatomy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know either. But it has to be able to read labels, right? So one of the things it does in the video is this old man comes up to it and says, is this paprika? I can't find my glasses. And it goes, that's cayenne, and your glasses are on your shirt. And it's a pretty funny interaction, but obviously it has to be able to read a label on a thing. That's why this thing can't just use LiDAR or something, and it actually has cameras, stereoscopic cameras. So what else can it read that's in your home that maybe you don't want it reading, right? Like there's a bunch of issues here. They say you can, you map your house with it and you label certain areas as off limits. But again, like everything we've ever seen as security folks, all these things can be broken. They can all not work the way that they're supposed to, or they can be overridden. I'm the main thing I'm looking forward to here are videos of these things bumbling about and like doing silly
falling
things
down the stairs.
Yeah.
Same as the Roomba. I can't wait till somebody's cat takes a diarrhea and then this thing just like chokes the entire first floor of the house with it. Yeah. I mean, these things are everywhere, right? Like I just bought this new TV that has a voice remote and literally it sits here with one battery out of it all day because the regular Roku remotes don't work on this TV. So you have to use the voice remote. And I don't want a microphone sitting next to me all day. Not that I don't have 400 in my house, but it's getting to the point where, and this is just like the right to repair laws, there should be a right to turn off. Like there should be physical switches on anything that has a camera or microphone on it that you can turn it off. And the fact that
transparency,
by law, you're not required to.
I need some way to see what this robot is seeing. I need some way to see what it is sending off. Like I need the ability to audit this thing and debug and see what it's seeing, know what it knows. So I think more and more that's going to be a requirement for products like this.
Jackie, I have a
few other things
that has a physical switch on it that can turn off the listening on it.
Yeah,
but it's not the TV remote.
This one doesn't have it, so I pop a battery out 5 times a day.
I did research the company, and they do have a security leader there, so that's good. At least, a lot of startups don't even have a security person there. But
I researched them also. They do not have a bug bounty. They don't have a vulnerability disclosure policy. There is no clear way of telling like where I should send security issues to. And then the other thing, they are trying to sell fleets of these to enterprises as well. So there's a business plan here as well. And my final thought here is I think this is a good candidate for the segue of robotics. It's too expensive. It's more than people need. It's too ambitious. I think, if you sell me a robotic dishwasher or something like that, at a fraction of the cost, or, like with Segway came out and, in hindsight, 25 years later, people just wanted an electric motor and a battery in their scooter or their bike. Right. Yeah. And that's what we see today. We don't see Segways all over the place because the infrastructure was already built for it. And it was at a price point that was affordable. So I think this could possibly be in the future, like we might look back and say, yeah, that was the Segway of robotics.
Well, and when one wheel breaks and it costs you $500 to ship it back to wherever it needs to go to be serviced, like 60 pounds doesn't ship cheaply. And I doubt they've got.
You can take your e-bike to any bike store, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Or service it yourself, right?
I also wonder how long they keep the video for, because there's no information about that.
I want to know who their financial backers are. I feel like any company that touches any level of personal privacy information should have to have full transparency as to who all of their investors and financial interests are. That's how you end up with the CIA buying Niantic and Pokemon Go becoming a surveillance tool, right? Is that these companies don't have to disclose who their financial backing is.
Which companies? Are you talking about 1X?
Yeah, 1X. But even Niantic, the company that made Pokemon Go, they ended up selling their data to the CIA, right? So I think one of the things that should be required if you're going to be able to store or collect personal data, especially in people's homes, is full transparency as to who your investors and financial backers are. So who has a vested interest in getting in your house.
So their funding, 1X's fund, their Series A was led by OpenAI and Tiger Global.
I can't imagine why either of those companies would want to know everything going on inside your house.
OpenAI seems to want the data, so.
Well, it's weird because Tiger Global is usually late stage investor, not a Series A investor, but it was a big Series A, and they just had a Series B in January 2024, and now they're looking to close $1 billion, or maybe they already have. Yeah, valuation of $39 billion. Okay.
You're going to become another loop in that chart of AI BS.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Or it's just going to be like, remember the AI pin, Humane AI pin that ended up selling for $39 million to HP Enterprise, HPE.
Yeah.
I think you could go that route also.
They sold it.
It's really cool engineering. I think the engineering somebody will buy that.
Yeah, I had a robot serve me at we went to one of those like seafood in a bag places, and they had a robot that had every table had a number, and the robot brought all of our food out, and it wasn't dumb for a restaurant. I could see that being really, really useful, just not in my house with 3 kids and dogs running around.
Yeah, I've eaten at a sushi, one of the with the
conveyor belt
sushi flying by and the conveyor belt.
Yeah,
and the drinks were brought out by a robot.
Nice.
Yeah. All right. That is all the time we have for today. Comment, let us know if you get a Neo home robot and how it is, how you're enjoying it. and whether or not you dress it up for Halloween and have it answer the door and scare the crap out of people.
Make it look like iRobot.
Yeah, right. All right. Jackie, Eamon, Sean, thank you so much for joining me today. This is a lovely one.
Yeah.
I enjoyed it.
Thanks for having us.
And a big thanks to everyone watching or listening to this week's episode of Enterprise Security Weekly. Next week, we'll be talking to Joshua Hay from Junto Security about rethinking identity. See you then.